Alara Vance moved through the dimly lit corridors of Havenwood Animal Sanctuary like a ghost, her footsteps barely whispering against the worn linoleum. The sprawling shelter, a cacophony of barks, meows, and chirps during the day, now settled into a muted symphony of sighs and soft snores. It was well past closing, and the last of the eager, well-meaning volunteers had departed, leaving Alara to her solitary ritual. Her small apartment, a short walk from the sanctuary, offered little solace. It was a space designed for function, not comfort, mirroring her own existence. Her dinner that evening was a cold, solitary affair. A steaming mug of lukewarm tea sat beside a plate of quickly prepared pasta, untouched. The only sounds breaking the silence were the rhythmic, wheezing breaths of Bartholomew, an ancient, one-eyed cat who had chosen Alara's lap as his permanent residence, and the occasional soft whimper from a three-legged terrier mix named Poppy, curled protectively at her feet. Both were former Havenwood residents, rescued and cherished by Alara, who seemed to find a deeper connection with creatures bearing their own scars. She didn't turn on the television, didn't play music. The quiet hum of the refrigerator and the gentle whir of the old fan were her only companions. Her mind, however, was a bustling city, ceaselessly replaying snippets of the day, cataloging forgotten tasks, and reevaluating the subtle shifts in the animals' moods. Her old, threadbare sweater, softened by countless washes, hung loosely on her frame. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, a testament to too many sleepless nights spent tending to sick animals, or simply worrying about those she couldn't save. Her auburn hair, usually a vibrant cascade, was pulled back in a hasty, utilitarian bun, wisps escaping to frame a face that held a quiet intensity. A perpetual concern etched into its delicate lines. On the small, chipped coffee table beside her, nestled amidst veterinary journals and half-eaten cat treats, lay a thick, well-worn binder. It wasn't a leisure read. It was a collection of old case files, some dating back years, detailing cases of animal cruelty and abandonment. Several pages were dog-eared, marked by underlined passages and scribbled notes in the margins, particularly those pertaining to an unsolved, brutal case of neglect from a decade ago that still haunted her. The injustice of it clung to her like a second skin, a constant reminder of the darkness that existed and her own perpetual fight against it. A sudden, insistent meow from Bartholomew stirred Alara from her reverie. He nudged her hand with his head, purring like a tiny engine. She absently stroked his matted fur, a faint smile touching her lips. Then, a sharp, frantic scratching from the living room caught her attention. Poppy let out a low growl. It was a familiar sound, one she'd heard countless times stray animals scratching at the back door of the sanctuary, seeking refuge. But this wasn't the sanctuary. It was her apartment building. A quiet, residential street where strays were a rare occurrence. Alara rose, her movements fluid and silent despite her weariness. She approached the window, pulling aside the worn lace curtain. Through the rain-streaked glass, she saw him a scrawny, soaking wet ginger cat, no bigger than her hand, huddled miserably under a dripping rose bush. He was trembling violently, his eyes wide and pleading as he clawed desperately at the glass, a tiny, heart-wrenching mule escaping his throat. She knew she shouldn't. It was late, she was exhausted, and she had a full day ahead of her at the sanctuary. Her apartment, though sparse, was already home to 2 special needs animals. Taking in another stray was a responsibility she honestly couldn't afford, either financially or emotionally. But as she watched the tiny creature shiver, its fur plastered to its bony frame, a familiar ache tightened in her chest. The rain lashed down, blurring the streetlights into hazy halos. Just for tonight, she murmured to herself. A common lie she told herself, knowing full well it would probably become permanent. She grabbed a towel and hurried to the back door, her heart already softening. She knelt, opening the door just enough for the cat to slip inside. It darted in, a streak of ginger, and immediately rubbed against her legs, purring with an intensity that belied its size. She scooped him up, cradling him in her arms. He was bone-thin, but his purr vibrated through her, a tiny motor of gratitude. She found a warm blanket, some wet food, and a shallow bowl of water. As he ate, ravenously but carefully, she gently dried his fur. He was a survivor, she realized, already seeing the faint glimmer of defiance in his wide, emerald eyes. She named him Ginger, a simple, immediate choice. Later, as Ginger purred contentedly on her lap, nestled beside Bartholomew, Alara felt a familiar sense of peace settle over her. This was her world, a world where the broken could find solace, where the voiceless could find a voice, even if that voice only spoke to her. This small, spontaneous act of kindness, born of a deep, almost instinctual empathy, was not a burden. It was the quiet affirmation of her very being. It was her save the cat moment, a small yet profound testament to her unwavering compassion. As she drifted off to sleep, Ginger curled tightly against her side. Alara's hand instinctively brushed against the silver amulet nestled beneath her nightgown. It was a small, intricately carved wolf, howling at a crescent moon. She'd worn it since childhood, a gift from a mysterious benefactor she barely remembered, accompanied by a cryptic note about the voices of the silent souls. She never spoke of it, not to anyone. It was a secret, a quiet connection to a past she didn't fully understand, a whisper of a power she hadn't yet fully grasped. The amulet felt warm against her skin, almost vibrating with a subtle energy, a silent promise of something yet to come. The storm broke with a vengeance that night, a furious symphony of wind and rain that lashed against the old sanctuary building. Alara lay awake for hours, the rhythmic drumming on the roof amplifying the gnawing anxiety in her stomach. It wasn't just the storm. It was the unsettling quietude of her own apartment, a stark contrast to the usual gentle purrs and soft snores of her rescued companions. Ginger was still new, still settling in, and Bartholomew and Poppy, for all their comfort, couldn't fill the void that felt particularly acute tonight. Just as the first hint of pre-dawn gray began to bleed through the heavy clouds, a sound sliced through the din of the tempest. It wasn't a growl, nor a bark, nor the usual whimper of a lost animal. It was a cry, a sustained, piercing wail that carried a primal desperation, a raw anguish that sent a shiver down Alara's spine. This was no ordinary distress call. It was a lament, a plea, imbued with a frantic urgency that resonated deep within her, stirring dormant memories of helplessness and loss. It sounded like the very essence of despair, begging for a voice to answer. Alara shot upright in bed, her heart hammering against her ribs. Bartholomew stirred, his one good eye blinking open, and Poppy lifted her head, letting out a low, questioning whine. The cry came again, closer this time, clearer, despite the raging storm. It was a puppy, undoubtedly, but the sound was unlike any she had ever heard from a young animal. It was too profound, too laden with desperate meaning. It wasn't just fear. It was as if the creature was trying to convey a vital, immediate message, something crucial that couldn't wait. A cold dread seeped into Alara's bones. She'd faced countless abandoned animals, each with their own story of neglect and sorrow. But this felt different. It was an urgent summons, a thread pulling at the very fabric of her soul, reminding her of the animals she couldn't save, the whispers she hadn't understood in time. A part of her, the logical, exhausted part, screamed at her to ignore it. It's just the wind. It's just another stray. But the other part, the deeper, more intuitive self, knew this was a threshold, a moment that demanded her attention. She scrambled out of bed, pulling on a thick sweater and jeans over her pajamas. The cries intensified, a relentless, mournful rhythm, seeming to emanate from the front door of the sanctuary itself. The thought of a tiny, defenseless creature enduring the lashing rain and bone-chilling wind was unbearable. The rational part of her tried to justify it. Someone probably just dropped it off. It's probably fine. It's just cold. Yet, the persistent, almost human-like quality of the cry resonated with an unsettling familiarity. It was as if something within her was being shaken awake. A forgotten instinct, a dormant sense of connection. Reaching the main entrance of Havenwood, the wails became a raw, piercing symphony. Alara paused, her hand on the cold metal doorknob, a tremor running through her. What if it wasn't just a puppy? What if there was something else? The storm raged outside, the trees thrashing wildly, casting eerie, dancing shadows through the glass panels of the door. The building creaked and groaned around her, amplifying her unease. She hesitated, her fear momentarily outweighing her empathy. She had seen too much pain, too much cruelty. Sometimes, the unknown was safer left undisturbed. But then the cry came again, closer, so utterly heartbroken and desperate that it shattered her resolve. It was a direct plea, a raw, undeniable call for help that bypassed her logic and struck straight at her compassionate core. It was the sound of a living being at the absolute brink, and she, Alara Vance, could not, would not, ignore it. The sheer urgency of it, the feeling that this particular cry held more than just puppy distress, that it held a secret, pulled her forward. This wasn't just about saving a puppy. It was about answering a call that felt intrinsically tied to her own unspoken purpose. With a deep breath, she unlatched the heavy bolts and pulled the door open, bracing herself against the torrent of wind and rain that instantly surged into the warmth of the lobby. The scene that met her eyes was both heartbreaking and utterly unbelievable. Huddled against the very threshold, soaked to the bone and trembling violently, was a tiny puppy, no bigger than her hand, with fur the color of midnight and eyes that glowed an astonishing, piercing blue, reflecting the ambient light with an almost unnatural intensity. It was this puppy, undoubtedly, whose ceaseless, guttural cries had torn through the night. But what truly stole Alara's breath, what made her jaw drop and her mind reel, was not just the puppy itself, but what was tied securely around its neck. It was a small, crudely fashioned canvas pouch, thick with mud and dripping wet. From within its folds, Alara could faintly discern a faint, almost imperceptible sound, a weak, shallow gasp for breath, and a faint, acrid smell of damp earth and something else, something metallic and unsettling, like old blood. The pouch was barely the size of her palm, but it held a terrifying weight. The puppy, its piercing blue eyes fixed on Alara, began to whimper. A new sound now, one of urgent instruction rather than mere despair. It nudged its head towards the pouch, then pawed frantically at Alara's leg, as if imploring her to understand, to act. This wasn't just a stray. This was a messenger. And what it carried was something far more profound, far more horrifying than a simple discarded life. The unbelievable wasn't a miracle, but a profound, disturbing secret, forcing Alara onto a path she never could have foreseen, a path from which there would be no turning back. The fragile warmth of her quiet, solitary life had just been violently shattered. Alara's hands trembled as she reached for the crude canvas pouch, her gaze never leaving the puppy's intense blue eyes. The tiny creature, a male, continued to nuzzle her leg, its soft whimpers now laced with an almost desperate urgency. As her fingers closed around the damp fabric, the weak gasp from within grew slightly louder, followed by a faint, sickly scent. A chill that had nothing to do with the storm outside crawled up her spine. With extreme caution, Alara untied the sodden string that bound the pouch. Inside, nestled amidst a clump of muddy, matted fur, lay another puppy. This one was even smaller, barely formed, its fragile body caked in what looked like dried mud and something dark, almost black. It was barely breathing, its tiny chest rising and falling imperceptibly. A faint, almost imperceptible heartbeat fluttered beneath her fingertips as she gently lifted it. This puppy was a stark white, a ghostly contrast to its midnight-furred sibling. But the most disturbing discovery wasn't just the puppy itself. Tucked tightly against its frail body was a crumpled, blood-stained piece of paper. Alara carefully unfolded it, her eyes scanning the hastily scrawled words, barely legible in the dim light of the sanctuary lobby. It was a fragment of a larger document, but the words that jumped out at her were chilling. Ancient bloodline, unique ability, must be silenced. And then, a series of coordinates, hastily jotted down, followed by a rough, unsettling symbol she didn't recognize. As Alara's eyes darted from the cryptic note to the two helpless puppies, a sudden, powerful wave of sensation washed over her. It wasn't a sound, but a distinct impression. A surge of vivid, fragmented images that flooded her mind, a dark, enclosed space, the frantic scurry of paws, the glint of metal, and a pervasive, suffocating fear. The images were fleeting, almost dreamlike, but the emotional intensity was undeniable. It was the white puppy's fear, its pain, bleeding directly into her consciousness. She wasn't just observing its distress, she was feeling it. This was her hidden talent, the whispers of the silent souls, manifesting in a terrifying, undeniable way. She instinctively placed her hands over the white puppy, a desperate need to soothe and protect overwhelming her. As she did, a gentle warmth spread from her palms, a strange, tingling energy that seemed to flow into the tiny creature. The puppy's breathing steadied, its shallow gasps easing into more rhythmic breaths. The phantom images in Alara's mind receded, replaced by a faint sense of calm. A fragile thread of hope. Shadow, the dark-furred puppy, let out a soft whine of relief, then nudged her hand, his blue eyes fixed on her with an uncanny intelligence. It was at that precise moment, as Alara knelt on the cold floor, cradling the tiny, dying puppy, that she heard the squeak of the office door. Mr. Davies, the sanctuary's longtime manager, stood silhouetted in the doorway. His face, usually a canvas of weary pragmatism, was now a mask of irritation and suspicion. He was a man of routines and regulations, distrustful of anything that deviated from the norm, and prone to believing the worst about anything he couldn't explain. He had heard the incessant cries from the front, had grumbled about the storm, and had reluctantly decided to check on what he assumed was simply a badly behaved stray. He took in the scene before him, Alara, huddled on the floor, whispering unintelligibly to the two puppies, one of which seemed to be radiating some unseen energy, and the other, a sickly white creature, lying limp in her hands. He hadn't seen the crumpled note, nor did he understand the profound connection Alara shared with the animals. All he saw was something bizarre, something other. Alara, what on earth is going on here? His voice was raspy, laced with a familiar note of skepticism. Another stray at this hour, and what are you doing, muttering to them like that? He eyed the white puppy with a distinct distaste. Looks like it's on its last legs. Probably best to put it out of its misery. Alara flinched, her protective instincts flaring. No, he's not. I'm helping him. There's something else here, Mr. Davies. Look. She tried to show him the crumpled note, but he waved it away dismissively. Nonsense, Alara. You're always finding some new melodrama. Just take care of it. And try not to make so much noise. We have neighbors, you know. He cast a suspicious glance at Shadow, who had begun to growl softly, a low rumble in his tiny chest. That one looks feisty. Not a good sign for adoption. Mr. Davies then began his subtle, yet deliberate, campaign of undermining Alara. He started assigning her the most difficult and unpleasant tasks, like cleaning out the notoriously filthy quarantine pens or dealing with particularly aggressive animals. Tasks usually distributed among several volunteers. He withheld crucial supplies, claiming budget cuts, forcing Alara to improvise or use her own meager funds. He would subtly question her decisions in front of other staff members, hinting that she was too emotionally invested or unprofessional. "Alara, are you sure you're properly medicating these animals?" he might ask, loud enough for others to hear, even when she meticulously followed protocols. Or, "I'm hearing some peculiar stories about the way you communicate with the animals. We're a reputable sanctuary, not a circus act." His words were never direct accusations, but insidious whispers designed to sow doubt and isolate her. He was planting seeds of suspicion, slowly, surely, in the fertile ground of gossip and misunderstanding. Alara felt the weight of his disapproval, the subtle slights that chipped away at her confidence. But more chillingly, she began to notice other, stranger occurrences. Supplies would go missing from the medical wing. Doors that should have been locked would be ajar. Faint, unfamiliar scents would linger in the air long after everyone else had left. One evening, she found a strange, crudely drawn symbol scratched into the dirt near the sanctuary's back gate. The same symbol she'd seen on the crumpled note. It was a silent warning, a menacing whisper in the dark. These were not Mr. Davies's doing. She knew. Someone else was at play, someone who had left the puppies at the door, someone who was now watching her. The presence of these shadowy figures, always just beyond her sight, added a new layer of dread to her already isolated existence. They were a threat she couldn't quantify, a danger she couldn't name, and their mysterious motives were slowly beginning to align with the unsettling message hidden in the crumpled note. She was being watched, followed, and somehow, the arrival of the two puppies had inextricably linked her to a secret that was far larger and far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. The sanctuary, once Alara's refuge, began to feel like a cage. Mr. Davies's veiled criticisms became more pointed, his skepticism curdling into open contempt. He started spreading rumors among the other volunteers, whispers about Alara's unusual methods and her over-attachment to the animals, particularly the two new puppies. The white one, whom Alara had named Casper for his spectral paleness, remained frail, requiring constant, meticulous care. Shadow, on the other hand, grew stronger every day, his midnight fur gleaming, his blue eyes sharp and almost unnervingly intelligent. He was Alara's constant companion, always at her heels, a tiny, loyal shadow. The subtle acts of sabotage intensified. One morning, Alara found the special, temperature-controlled incubator for Casper unplugged, its power cord neatly coiled and placed on a nearby shelf. Another time, critical medical supplies she had ordered for a new batch of sick kittens mysteriously vanished from the locked storage room. Alara knew it wasn't Mr. Davies. His motives were rooted in a petty jealousy and a rigid adherence to outdated rules. This was something darker, more calculated. Through it all, Shadow became her silent confidant. He seemed to understand her unspoken thoughts, her anxieties. He would nudge her hand when she was lost in thought, or emit a low, comforting rumble when she was overwhelmed. And then, there were the whispers. Whenever Alara held Casper, or even just thought intensely about the strange events unfolding around them, the fragmented images would return flashes of shadowy figures, the glint of a strange, circular emblem, and a pervasive sense of being hunted. Shadow, too, seemed to transmit these feelings, his blue eyes sometimes clouding with an almost human anxiety, then clearing with a fierce determination. It was as if he was trying to communicate something vital, something urgent, a language only she could begin to interpret. The cryptic note, crumpled and stained, had spoken of an ancient bloodline and a unique ability. Alara couldn't shake the feeling that the puppies, especially Casper, were at the heart of this dangerous mystery. They weren't just abandoned, they were sent. Then came the hammer blow. One overcast Tuesday morning, during the weekly staff meeting, Mr. Davies stood before the small assembled group of tired caregivers and volunteers. His face was grim, a mask of feigned regret. "Effective immediately," he announced, his voice devoid of warmth. "We will be closing the east wing of the sanctuary. A recent internal assessment has revealed unsanitary conditions and a potential outbreak of an unknown illness." A ripple of shock went through the room. The East Wing was where the most vulnerable animals were housed: the critically ill, the very young, the recovering, and the ones deemed unadoptable due to chronic conditions. It was Casper's home, and the home of many other fragile creatures Alara had poured her heart into. "Unknown illness," Alara interjected, her voice sharp with disbelief. "That's preposterous. I've been diligently monitoring all the animals. There's been nothing but a few minor colds, easily managed." Mr. Davies turned to her, a sneer playing on his lips. "Perhaps your unique methods of monitoring aren't as effective as you believe. Alara, the decision has been made. All animals in the East Wing will be relocated to a specialized facility. For their own good, of course." The chilling implication was clear. These animals would be euthanized. Alara's blood ran cold. A specialized facility. What facility? Mr. Davies, and why the sudden urgency? This sounds like a cover-up. "That's enough. Alara," he snapped, his voice rising. "You're disrupting this meeting. The sanctuary is facing a severe financial shortfall. This closure is a necessary measure. And as for your insubordination, consider yourself warned." He then delivered the ultimatum, his eyes fixed on Alara with cold satisfaction. "If you cannot produce undeniable proof that there is no illness, and that these measures are unwarranted within 48 hours, the relocation process will begin. And I assure you, Alara, once these animals are moved, they are gone forever." 48 hours. 2 days to prove a negative. To expose a conspiracy she barely understood, against a man who clearly held the power to destroy everything she cared about. The pressure was suffocating. The other volunteers, though sympathetic, looked away, intimidated by Mr. Davies's authority, and perhaps by the strange intensity that surrounded Alara. They were afraid of losing their own positions, of incurring his wrath. Alara was truly alone in this fight. That night, as the deadline loomed, the shadowy figures became bolder. Alara found a black van with tinted windows parked down the street from the sanctuary, its engine idling silently. When she approached, it sped off. Later, she discovered a new, deeper scratch mark, an even more menacing variation of the symbol, carved into the wooden frame of Casper's enclosure. It was a threat, a promise of what would happen if she didn't back down. She spent the night poring over her old case files, particularly the unsolved cruelty case from her past. The symbols, the coordinates, the cryptic message, it all felt connected, somehow, to a network of animal trafficking and illegal breeding. The realization hit her with sickening clarity. The unknown illness was a fabrication, a smokescreen to remove the animals, specifically Casper, from the sanctuary. The men in the black van, the true orchestrators, were after something valuable, something they believed was hidden within the fragile white puppy, something related to his ancient bloodline and his unique ability. They knew about her too, about her connection to the animals. She was a threat to their operation, an obstacle to be removed. As dawn broke on the second day, Alara felt a desperate surge of resolve. She was exhausted, terrified, but the thought of those innocent animals, of Casper and Shadow, facing such a cruel fate, ignited a fierce, protective fire within her. She would not let them win. She would fight, even if it meant risking everything. Shadow, sensing her determination, nudged her hand. his blue eyes glowing with an almost mystical understanding. A silent promise of unwavering support. The gauntlet had been thrown. The air in the east wing of Havenwood Animal Sanctuary hung heavy with unspoken dread. The 48-hour deadline was minutes from expiring. Outside, the first whispers of a new, even more violent storm were beginning to brew, mirroring the tempest in Alara's heart. She had spent the last 2 days meticulously documenting every animal's health, cross-referencing veterinary records, and searching for any anomaly that could expose Mr. Davies's lie. But every record confirmed the truth. There was no unknown illness. The health of the animals in the East Wing, fragile as some were, was stable. The real illness was the corruption festering within the sanctuary's walls. Shadow, his blue eyes intense and watchful, remained a silent sentinel by her side, a constant, comforting weight against her leg. Casper, still delicate but now breathing with a faint, steady rhythm, lay nestled in a small, heated bed, oblivious to the encroaching danger. Alara clutched the crumpled, blood-stained note in her hand, the chilling coordinates and the strange symbol burning into her mind. She knew these men were coming, and she knew they weren't just after the land. They were after Casper, and perhaps her. Just as the old grandfather clock in the main lobby chimed the hour, a shrill, piercing wail ripped through the sanctuary. It wasn't the sound of an animal in distress. It was the unmistakable shriek of a fire alarm. Simultaneously, the heavy double doors of the east wing burst open with a crash. A wall of smoke, thick and acrid, billowed into the corridor, followed by the orange glow of hungry flames. "Fire!" a panicked voice screamed from somewhere outside. Alara's breath hitched. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. This was their final, brutal act of relocation. The men in the black van. They were here, and they meant to silence every living creature, and perhaps every inconvenient truth. Without a second thought, Alara grabbed a thick, damp blanket from a nearby shelf, pulling it over her head and shoulders like a makeshift shield. "Stay here! Shadow!" she commanded, her voice hoarse with urgency. But Shadow, loyal to a fault, merely gave a single, determined bark and darted ahead, his sleek black form disappearing into the smoke. The east wing was a chaotic inferno. Flames licked greedily at the wooden beams, and the air was thick with the suffocating stench of burning plastic and fur. Cries of fear and confusion erupted from the animal enclosures, the panicked barks of dogs, the terrified hisses of cats, the frantic chirping of birds. Alara, despite the searing heat and choking smoke, moved with a terrifying grace, her years of working in the sanctuary kicking in. She knew every inch of this place, every cage, every hiding spot. She found herself driven by an instinct beyond mere sight. The whispers, usually faint impressions, now surged into a frantic, overwhelming torrent of raw emotion. She felt the animals' terror, their pain, their desperate pleas for release. Their fear became her own, a searing, motivating force. She could feel the small cat cowering beneath a collapsing shelf, the whimpering puppy trapped behind a locked cage, the bird thrashing in a smoke-filled aviary. Her hands, guided by this invisible conduit, moved with a horrifying efficiency. She fumbled with latches, twisted rusted hinges, and ripped open cages, her fingers bleeding and raw. Each animal she freed darted away into the less smoke-filled corridors, their terrified cries fading into the roar of the fire. But the white puppy, Casper, remained her primary focus. He was in the far corner, near the collapsed back wall. The flames were licking dangerously close to his incubator. "Casper," she choked, her voice a ragged whisper. The heat was unbearable, searing her lungs. Her vision blurred, tears streaming down her face, mixing with soot and sweat. She pushed through a collapsing doorway, debris raining down around her. The incubator was engulfed in a halo of flickering orange light. She reached it, her hands burning as she yanked at the charred plug. The plastic casing was melting, smoke pouring from the vents. She pulled Casper out, wrapping him in a small, clean towel, holding him close to her chest. He was trembling violently, but his breathing was steady. Just as she turned to find an escape route, a massive wooden beam, weakened by the fire, groaned ominously above them. It splintered, then crashed down, blocking their only clear path to the main corridor. Dust and debris exploded, momentarily blinding her. A searing pain shot through her leg as she stumbled, falling to her knees. The path was gone. They were trapped. Panic, cold and absolute, seized her. She tried to lift the beam, but it was too heavy, too hot. The flames roared, advancing with terrifying speed. Casper whimpered weakly against her chest. She had failed. After all her fighting, all her effort, they were going to die here, in the heart of the very place she had dedicated her life to protecting. No, not like this. Just then, Shadow appeared through the smoke, a small, dark blur. He whined, then barked sharply, an insistent, almost demanding sound. He repeatedly scratched at a small, almost invisible crack in the far wall, a section that looked like solid concrete. Alara, desperate, eyes stinging, focused on his frantic movements. His blue eyes, normally bright, now glowed with an almost ethereal intensity, pulling her gaze, urging her to look closer. She crawled towards him, her leg throbbing. As she got closer, she saw a hairline fissure in the wall, almost imperceptible. Shadow scratched at it again, then nudged her hand towards a loose stone near the base, trusting him with every fiber of her being, knowing he was her last hope. Alara clawed at the stone. It came loose, revealing a small, dark opening. It was a ventilation shaft, a forgotten part of the old building's original design, overgrown and mostly sealed. It was too small for a person, but maybe. With renewed, almost superhuman strength, fueled by desperation and Shadow's silent urging, Alara began to tear at the crumbling mortar and loose bricks around the opening. Her hands were raw, bleeding, but she barely felt it. Each animal she had saved, each life she had fought for, echoed in her mind, spurring her on. She felt the heat on her back, heard the cracking of timbers, but she pushed harder. Finally, a small, dark tunnel, just wide enough for her to squeeze through, appeared. She pushed Casper through first, then scrambled, pulling herself through the narrow, debris-filled passage. Shadow wriggled in after her, his sleek body surprisingly agile. The tunnel was dark, claustrophobic, but it was a lifeline. They crawled, pushing past dust and old cobwebs, until they saw a faint glimmer of light, with a final surge of adrenaline. Alara pushed through a final crumbling section of wall, emerging into the cold, rainy night. She gasped for air, collapsing onto the wet ground. The east wing, engulfed in flames, roared behind them, a monument to destruction. Mr. Davies, along with a few frantic volunteers and the first arriving firefighters, stood frozen, their faces illuminated by the inferno. Their expressions shifted from horror to disbelief as Alara, covered in soot and grime, her clothes torn, emerged from the smoke, clutching Casper to her chest, Shadow standing protectively beside her. Mr. Davies's face, usually set in a sneer of skepticism, drained of all color. His jaw dropped. He had seen her walk into that inferno, presumed her lost. Now, she stood before him, a spectral figure from the flames, a living testament to courage and an undeniable refutation of his lies. The other volunteers, their faces etched with fear and then utter astonishment, began to murmur. From their fear, a wave of relief washed over them, then a profound, undeniable sense of awe. Alara, the quiet, eccentric animal whisperer, had just walked out of the heart of a raging fire, saving not only the fragile white puppy, but the very essence of hope for Havenwood. Even the shadowy figures, who had been watching from a distance, vanished into the night, their carefully orchestrated plan crumbling before their eyes, replaced by a sudden, chilling realization of her true power. The fire might have been a symbol of their destruction, but it had instead become the fiery crucible of Ilara's vindication. The dawn after the fire was a surreal tapestry of destruction and miraculous survival. The east wing was a charred skeleton, smoke still curling lazily from its ruins. But the rest of Havenwood stood, battered but unbroken. Firefighters moved through the wreckage, hosing down embers, their faces grim. Amidst the chaos, Ilara stood, still clutching Casper, shadow a vigilant guardian at her feet. Her face was streaked with soot, her clothes torn, but her eyes, though weary, shone with a quiet triumph. Mr. Davies approached her, his usual stiff posture slumped, his face pale and etched with something akin to remorse. He looked utterly defeated, not just by the fire, but by the undeniable proof of Ilara's extraordinary resilience and compassion. The skeptical sneer was gone, replaced by an expression of profound shock and reluctant admiration. "Ilara," he began, his voice raspy, barely above a whisper. I don't know what to say. I never truly believed you." He gestured vaguely at the smoldering ruins. This wasn't an accident, was it? And you knew. You knew something was coming." Ilara looked at him, her gaze unwavering. It was deliberate. "Mr. Davies. They were trying to get rid of the animals, especially Casper." She gently stroked the white puppy's head. "And they wanted to silence me." He flinched, the words clearly hitting their mark. "I've been a fool. Ilara, a blind, arrogant fool. I let them manipulate me, with their promises of donations and restructuring. I thought I was doing what was best for the sanctuary." He hung his head, shame etched on his face. "I suspected something was off, but I never imagined this." He looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "The note you showed me. I should have listened. I should have believed you." He paused, then took a deep breath. "I've already contacted the authorities. The police found evidence of accelerants, and I gave them the information about those men, the ones who were pressuring me, the ones who were asking about special animals." The shadowy figures, the true orchestrators of the plot, were now on the run. The investigation quickly uncovered their network, a ruthless ring involved in illegal animal breeding for profit, targeting rare bloodlines and unique abilities, just as the crumpled note had hinted. The unknown illness was a carefully crafted lie, a smokescreen to seize valuable animals, and the fire was their desperate attempt to cover their tracks and eliminate witnesses. Their leader, a cold, calculating man who valued profit over life, was apprehended a few days later, his entire operation dismantled. He lost everything, facing severe legal repercussions for arson, animal cruelty, and conspiracy. Justice, swift and absolute, had found him. Mr. Davies, for his part, didn't try to shirk his responsibility. He made a public statement, acknowledging his grave errors in judgment and praising Ilara's heroic actions. He offered his resignation, but the board, seeing his genuine remorse and recognizing his years of dedicated service, asked him to stay on as a senior advisor, working directly under Ilara. It was a tangible act of contrition, a public acknowledgement of her vision and integrity. The opportunity that emerged from the ashes was profound. News of Ilara's heroism spread like wildfire, picked up by local news outlets and eventually going viral online. Donations poured in from all over the world, from animal lovers touched by her story. Community volunteers, inspired by her courage, flocked to Havenwood, offering their time, skills, and resources. With this outpouring of support and newfound funding, Havenwood Animal Sanctuary began to rebuild, not just the East Wing, but its very foundation. Ilara was unanimously appointed as the new director of Havenwood. This wasn't just a promotion, It was the realization of a lifelong dream, a chance to implement her vision for a true haven for animals. She had complete autonomy to develop innovative programs, expand facilities, and ensure every animal received the care and love it deserved. It was more than a job. It was a calling, a vast canvas upon which she could paint a future of hope and healing for countless voiceless souls. Weeks later, as the skeletal remains of the East Wing were being cleared, making way for a grander, more modern facility, Alara and Mr. Davies sat on a newly installed bench overlooking the quiet central courtyard of the sanctuary. Casper, now much stronger, scampered playfully with Shadow at their feet, his white fur gleaming in the afternoon sun. I was so blinded by my own rigid thinking. Alara, Mr. Davies confessed, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. I saw rules, budgets, problems. I never saw the magic. I never saw you. He looked at her, a genuine, appreciative smile on his face. How did you do it? How did you know where to go in that fire? How did you calm them? Alara smiled faintly, a serene expression gracing her features. I didn't do it alone. Shadow. He guided me. And Casper. He helped me hear them. I listen. I feel what they feel. It's like they have a voice. Mr. Davies, a quiet voice that only a few of us are attuned to. She paused, then looked out at the playful puppies. Perhaps some things are beyond logic. Perhaps some bonds are simply meant to be. And sometimes, it takes a great darkness to reveal the greatest light within us. Mr. Davies nodded, his gaze distant, contemplative. You've shown me that, Alara. You've shown all of us. Havenwood was always a sanctuary. But now it has a soul. He rose, a new lightness in his step. What are your plans for the new East Wing, Director Vance? Alara's eyes lit up. It will be a state-of-the-art rehabilitation center for animals who have been through the worst, and it will be called the Whisperer's Wing, a place where every silent soul can find its voice again. 3 years later, the sun, bright and benevolent, streamed through the expansive skylights of Havenwood Sanctuary, Alara's legacy, casting warm pools of light onto the gleaming, polished floors. The scent of antiseptic and fresh hay mingled with the subtle, comforting aroma of baked treats from the on-site animal bakery. Alara Vance, no longer the quiet, haunted figure of the past, moved through the bustling facility with an effortless grace. Her auburn hair now often braided with a hint of silver, her eyes bright with purpose and a newfound peace. Havenwood had blossomed under her directorship. It was no longer just a local shelter. It had become a beacon of hope, a national leader in animal welfare, renowned for its innovative rehabilitation programs and its unwavering commitment to the most challenging cases. The old, charred East Wing had risen from its ashes, transformed into the Whisperer's Wing, a state-of-the-art facility equipped with advanced veterinary technology, sensory therapy rooms, and spacious, naturalistic enclosures designed to heal not just physical wounds, but emotional scars. Alara's unique talent, once a source of quiet isolation, was now celebrated. She was widely known as the Animal Whisperer. Her ability to connect with and understand animals on a profound level chronicled in countless articles and documentaries. She had even given a TED Talk, captivating audiences with stories of her profound connection to the animal kingdom, and inspiring thousands to reconsider their relationship with non-human life. Shadow, ever present, was usually curled at her feet in her office or accompanying her on rounds, his striking blue eyes having become a symbol of Havenwood's extraordinary story. Casper, the tiny white puppy whose survival had ignited this transformation, had grown into a majestic, serene dog, his gentle nature a testament to the power of healing. He often served as a therapy animal in the Whisperer's Wing, his calm presence soothing anxious newcomers. Alara's personal life, once barren, had also found its own quiet bloom. While she remained deeply dedicated to her work, the gnawing loneliness had finally receded. She had found a vibrant community of like-minded individuals, a true family among her staff and volunteers. Even Mr. Davies, now her trusted chief operations officer, had shed his former cynicism. He was a changed man, often observed quietly sitting with the animals, a soft, rare smile on his face. He had become one of Alara's staunchest advocates, his pragmatism now tempered by genuine empathy. Her past, the old case file, the lingering grief over the animals she couldn't save, no longer held her captive. Instead, it fueled her resolve, channeling her pain into a powerful force for good. She no longer saw herself as a victim of circumstance, but as an architect of change, a guardian of the voiceless. Alara, however, knew that her purpose extended beyond the walls of Havenwood. True to the paying it forward principle, she had established the Whispering Paw Foundation. This nonprofit organization, funded by a global network of donors inspired by Alara's work, provided crucial financial aid, medical supplies, and expert guidance to smaller, struggling animal shelters and independent rescuers across the country. Through the foundation, Alara organized national workshops and online courses, teaching her unique methods of animal communication and rehabilitation, empowering a new generation of animal caregivers. She stressed the importance of empathy, patience, and the profound understanding that every animal, no matter how broken, had a story to tell and a right to be heard. One golden afternoon, Alara stood on a newly constructed hill overlooking Havenwood, a quiet place of contemplation she had designed herself. Shadow leaned against her leg, his soft fur a familiar comfort. Casper, now a vision of serene white, lay peacefully beside them. The silver amulet, the wolf howling at the moon, now rested openly on her chest, a symbol of her journey, no longer hidden. Below them, the sanctuary pulsed with life, the joyous barks of playing dogs, the contented purrs of sunbathing cats, the gentle cooing of doves in the aviary. These were the voices of the silent souls, now amplified, celebrated, and protected. Alara closed her eyes, and through the amulet, she felt the profound connection, the intricate web of life, the collective heartbeat of every creature she had saved, and every creature yet to be saved. It was a symphony of gratitude, a chorus of contentment. She opened her eyes, a single tear tracing a path through the dust on her cheek. It was a tear of pure, unadulterated joy. The moon, though hidden by the daylight, felt close, almost tangible. Shadow let out a soft, contented howl, a sound that seemed to echo her own profound sense of peace and purpose. It was a song of life, of hope, and of the boundless power of unconditional love. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies, and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming stories.